Cisneros, Federico,
Okay.
Rendon, Ruben.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's Wednesday, March the 21st. It is 5:30 p.m. Please rise for the invocation, please. Vicki, would you please?
Father, we praise you and we thank you for gathering us here today. We ask that you send your Holy Spirit and bless this meeting and everybody present, that the decisions made today are for the betterment of our courts and our community. We ask this in the name of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Amen. So, Vice Chairman, would you lead us on the Pledge of Allegiance, sir?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mark?
Okay. We're going to take some of the items out of order today. We're going to go right to number 2, which is a public comment. We have quite a few speakers set up to speak. Just like to remind everybody that we have a time limit of 5 minutes for each speaker, and that the total allotted time for our public audience is 30 minutes. So with that said, the first speaker is Mr. Jose Cisneros.
Let me translate. Tienen, que van a hablar, tenemos 5 minutos para hablar y un total de 30 minutos o lo menos, pues le da chance a más para que pueda hablar.
Yo soy José Cisneros.
Si puede, por favor, acá.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es José Cisneros. El comentario que yo traigo aquí a esta reunión es precisamente lo del Master Plan. Es un estudio que están ustedes tratando de echar a andar para el puente del puerto. Sentimos que ahorita agregar costos a nuestros movimientos de servicio de fletes y de los clientes de Monterrey, de todos los lugares, es agregar dinero automáticamente a los servicios. Y también queremos, yo en lo particular, rechazo totalmente cualquier costo que pudiera haber de ingreso al puerto para precisamente mantenimiento o cualquier cosa que se pudiera utilizar que vaya en contra de nuestros costos de servicio o costos de operación. Sentimos que ahorita tenemos enfrente, ¿cómo pudiéramos llamarlo? Un puerto de Tampico, un puerto de Altamira, muy probablemente en corto tiempo, a lo mejor hasta el mismo puerto de Matamoros. Ya se habla de que están haciendo ahorita lo necesario para echarlo a andar como puerto de altura. Sentimos que agregar costos de operación a nosotros como fleteros, a los industriales, en este momento es quedar fuera de la competencia. Ese es el comentario que yo tenía.
Muchas gracias, señor Cisneros. ¿Quién más quería decir algo?
Yeah, the second speaker is Federico Rendon, speaking to item number 9, the bridge item.
I'm a Mexican carrier, and we load up here in the port. Part of the reason we oppose the new bridge study, the feasibility study, is because every time they have to balance a budget or they have to fix their budget or their spending, they always turn around and tax the transport company. Cameron County did it. To balance their budget, they went up, I think, $1.25. The port did it. They're charging $3 now. What we're afraid of is they do this feasibility study. I think it's going to cost like $10 million, something like that. They're going to turn around in a couple of months and charge us, instead of $3, $25. We're already competing with Laredo, with Veracruz, with all the other ports. We're this close to losing our business. Why? Because we're not competitive. We have the DOT, we have all the fines that we have to go through, and we're keeping our equipment new, but we can't be spending extra $5, $10 to go into the port. That's what we're afraid of. They're going to get the money to make the feasibility study. That's why we oppose the bridge. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ready.
Mr. Ruben Lopez.
Hi, my name is Ruben Lopez. I'm the Commissioner. It's basically the same. If this impact study or feasible study is going to have a large cost to us here at the port, we're really not in for it. You know, if it's not going to cost anything, we'll go ahead and do it. You know, but every day we're getting less and less competitive with those ports. And to add this cost onto us, I mean, I'm sure there's another way we can find to fix those roads. I mean, if it's asking TxDOT to give us back some of the money we already paid them, if the Overweight Urban Fund has a surplus, you know, that's our money. Us Mexican truckers paid it, and it's there. Well, if we didn't use it, well, we want it back. for what? To give it to you to fix the roads. We honestly, we feel it's been treated a little bit unfair because, as my fellow colleague was saying, I mean, Forest Bridge is $14, Brownsville Bridge is $22.25. I mean, we can't compete. Some of the ports in Mexico don't charge anything to go in. We checked Tuxpan, Veracruz. They have no fee to go inside the port. We still get, fines by USDOT, by DPS, because, the permit wasn't made for Mexican trucks. It was designed for an American truck that has a sliding fifth wheel or a sliding axle. Mexican trucks, we don't have it. So we can never get the weight the way they want it. Even Progreso crosses overweight. There's no DPS station there. It's unfair for us to have a constant, DPS station here. We can never get away with it. DPS is always checking the weight, and sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong. But the cost is getting more and more expensive, and we would like you guys to take another look at that fee. Maybe you can help us out with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez.
Would it be okay if we give Donna Amar to explain item number 9 so that everybody understands what item number 9 is? Because I think there's a little confusion right now of what we're talking about. Donna?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Item number 9 is for a feasibility study to continue with our bridge project. And with this study, it's going to be a study done on the Mexican side to see if there is, in fact, a need for our bridge. And it has nothing to do with incurring any more charges to anybody, the Mexican truckers, the U.S. truckers, anyone. This is just simply for the port once and for all to see if the bridge is a viable project or if it's not. And if the results of that feasibility study come back and they say, no, Port of Brownsville, you don't have the need for a bridge, you don't have the traffic for a bridge, then that's where it'll stop right there, and then we'll get on with our other projects. If it comes back in a positive light, saying that yes, there is enough traffic here to warrant an international crossing, then at that time we'll have a game plan to go forward. But this has nothing to do with passing along the fees for this study to anyone, any users of the port.
There was reference made to the master plan. Can you elaborate on that, Ms. Amar?
Who's going to pay for that?
Stand up, please.
The port. The port will pay for it through our operating.
Well, we haven't voted yet.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But the port would pay for it, just like we pay for any other studies that we embark on. The fees, the master plan, the update on the master plan that you saw on the agenda, the port paid for that, and that's a study of the port, our infrastructure, our land usage, how we conduct business at the port, how to make us more productive in the business, our future plans going forward. Do we need a new dock? Do we not need a new dock? What kind of docks do we need? What kind of business can we recruit to come into the port? That's what the master plan is. And all that study was funded directly through the operation income of the port. Okay.
Any more questions or concerns regarding that?
Okay, the next speaker is Javier Hernandez.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
Soy Javier Hernández, represento una compañía de transportes de Matamoros y prácticamente comentarios en base a lo mismo que han expresado los compañeros, en que no estamos de acuerdo en ese cobro, porque ahorita son $3 y sabemos que en un año podrán ser 5 o 10, nos lo van a ir aumentando. Nuestra economía ahorita no está para seguir solventando pues estos gastos, que ya de por sí pues ya todos lo sabemos que pues ya pagamos un permiso por sobrepeso si es para mantenimiento, pagamos anualmente con la aduana, con US Customs, que es un puerto de entrada, una calcomanía anual por camión o por entrada por vehículo. Entonces es un gasto que se nos hace excesivo, aunque parezcan $3, se nos hace excesivo por el uso que nosotros estamos dando. y nos va a repercutir obviamente en nuestros costos, siendo que los clientes, en la mayoría que son de Monterrey o San Luis, los importadores o exportadores de acero, no nos lo van a costear a nosotros, porque ellos ya ejercieron en hacer una maniobra con ustedes, ya ejercieron su pago respectivo, ¿verdad?, en base a lo que vayan a manejar. Entonces prácticamente ese es mi comentario. Gracias.
Gracias, señor Hernández. ¿Quién más?
Okay, the next one is Javier Salivar.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Javier Saldívar, represento a Autoexpress Saldívar. Se me hace que el costo es algo que nos viene a pegar más porque con tantas revisiones anteriores que hemos tenido los transportistas, muchos de ellos ya colgaron los guantes y se me hace que con este cobro pues nosotros también tenemos que pensarle porque nos está pegando mucho en nuestros costos de operación. Entonces,
Gracias, señor Saldívar.
Mr. Bob Ostis.
Please introduce which company you're affiliated with, Mr. Ostis.
I'm Robert Ostis. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'd like to speak to your item number 9, which is the proposal for the checking and doing a feasibility study on Fort Bridge. I guess without going back into ancient history, I think I was Secretary or Treasurer for the Project Our Port Committee when we originally got the bond and worked very hard for it. And it's unfortunate what's happened to our funds and so forth, but that's history. I think that the Port Bridge is just as valid concept now as it was when we did that study, when Fritz Hofflock bought the property. I think it's got a lot of validity to it. Just listening to these truckers and their complaints, a lot of them would probably be taken care of by the bridge and this private road to come to the port. And perhaps even eventually between the overweight fee that we're charging and the bridge fee that Cameron County is charging, there'd be a lower fee. So I think it's worthwhile doing a feasibility study and seeing if it makes sense, and once and for all, just kind of figure it out and go from there. Thank you.
How much would you put into that study? How much would you recommend that we put into that study, by way of an investment?
Well, I don't know, Commissioner. I really don't know.
That's where we're at.
Yeah, that's a financial thing to deal with.
Thank you, Mr. Ostos.
Thank you.
Next.
Mr. Juan, and I'm probably going to not pronounce this right, but Garrido? I'm sorry.
Buenas tardes, comisionado. Los compañeros que están aquí. Me permito hablar en español porque la mayoría de mis compañeros hablan español y mi inglés es un poquito malo. Bueno, yo creo que también voy a decir un poco lo que han expresado mis compañeros, pero principalmente no es por decir no queremos que nos cobren, no es porque $3 o $5 puedan afectar en mucho o poco el transporte. Lo que sucede es que si yo llego a ver un cliente y le ofrezco que se venga a trabajar por Matamoros, lo más interesante hoy es el precio, porque el Tratado de Libre Comercio nos ha hecho más profesionales, la presencia del DPS en el puente nos ha hecho muy exigentes, hoy nuestros equipos son mejores, nuestros costos operativos se igualan un poquito ya con los del lado americano, siendo que en México los intereses son más caros. Pero ¿cómo me puedo traer un cliente si le digo, sabes qué, yo cruzando por Reynosa, que hoy día hago ese servicio por allá, al igual que mis compañeros, nos cuesta $12 un camión con caja cargada cruzando de Hidalgo hacia Reynosa, y aquí nos costaba hasta hace unos 4 meses $17.25, hoy nos cuesta $18.75. A esto hoy vemos que se vienen agregando otros costos. Entiendo y es de verdad muy bueno los estudios que se hagan para un nuevo puente, los arreglos que se le hagan en el puerto, todo eso es un desarrollo. Pero ¿cómo podemos sacar más dinero para poder hacer esas mejoras, esos proyectos a futuro? Proyectos que son muy buenos, un puente más para derramar economía, con la Interestatal 69. Creo que va a ser muy interesante esta ruta. Nuestros hijos van a ver mayores fuentes de trabajo. Solo que considero que es mayor ingreso el volumen de camiones trayendo más clientes a un mejor precio que pocos camiones con un precio alto. Yo compararía que prefiero tener aquí un Saks o un Walmart. Con un Walmart voy a vender volumen y los camiones son volumen. Es preferible que darme más dinero con entrada de camiones y maniobras en el puerto. No sé si hoy se manejan 10, el día de mañana que se manejen 20, pero vamos a ser competitivos con las otras aduanas. Tan solo con Reynosa ya cada vez vemos que crece más por ahí el comercio en comparación de Matamoros. El puerto Brownsville tiene todo para poder crecer más que un McAllen, pero no es así. Entonces creo que sería interesante analizar cuáles son las razones. Ellos tienen volumen hoy día, habría que ver si es interesante. Es muy interesante hacer ese estudio, ¿no? ¿Cómo podemos mejorar esto? Creo que el aumentar, el sacar de presupuesto el transporte no es la solución. Como dijo Javier también, hoy van a ser $3 y sí nos da mucho temor que dentro de un año sean 10, porque pues, es muy sencillo, ¿no?, buscar una salida, pero a futuro no creo que sea la solución. Considero que pues, si lo revisamos, yo sé que ya se revisó en algunas juntas anteriores, yo tuve la oportunidad de venir a la última, en un futuro sería, pues si hay otra oportunidad, revisarlo en base a lo que yo les comento, sería de beneficio desde mi punto de vista. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, señor Avido.
Next speaker is Francisco Elizondo.
Francisco Elizondo, yes, I know. I'm going to speak on behalf of Mr. Elizondo. He called a few minutes ago. And also, Transporte Llévame, he asked me to speak on his behalf. They brought me some information, very information that I was aware of, but they asked me to present it to you. When this increased, and a lot of people don't know that it was approved. And I think I'm going to ask you permission to speak in Spanish. Most of you speak Spanish, so I'm going to ask you permission to speak Spanish so they understand what. Lo que queremos decirles hoy de parte del Transporte Llévame y Transporte Libre Comercio es de que les queremos dar una idea de cuáles son los gastos. Sabemos que ustedes no saben realmente lo que pasa a un transportista. Lo primero que tiene que hacer es sacar su autoridad para operar. Le cuesta alrededor de $900. Tiene que sacar un decal, una estampilla para cruzar el puente que le cuesta $211 por camión, por año, por supuesto. Paga impuestos de diésel. El condado les aumentó el cobro del puente con la pretensión de que no se pagaba, que ellos entraban gratis, que no consumían diésel. Los que no consumen diésel tienen que pagar impuestos. Eso es algo que mucha gente no sabe y nos acusan de que no pagamos impuestos, que entramos gratis. Tenemos que llenar formulario del Texas DOT, del Departamento de Transporte, que pagamos $10 por cada camión, 10 camiones, $100. También los formularios de diferentes agencias federales y estatales. Ahora viene algo que ustedes no sabían y que la mayoría de la gente no sabe. Queremos ingresar al CityPad con aduanas, formar un partnership para entrar a Estados Unidos, que nos lo están requiriendo. Hay gastos, señores, de $5, $10 y $20,000 por empresa. Tenemos que poner guardias de seguridad, cámaras de seguridad, tenemos que contratar personal que hable inglés, inclusive, aunque estamos en México. Todos estos gastos se suman a los costos de la empresa. El código alfa, $33 más el formulario que hay que pagar, ese lo cobro yo. Permisos de sobrepeso, $33, y la persona que tiene que obtenerlos y todo eso. Multas y violaciones que están al día, diariamente nos acosan hasta dentro de aduanas, ya se meten hasta dentro de la aduana a sacarnos los camiones, de $200 hasta $1,500. Tuve un cliente que pagó $5,000 de una multa. Porque cometía la infracción. Es que es demasiado. Ahora dicen que no sabemos ni quién
pone ese precio de esas multas tan elevadas? Nomás nos lo encasquetaron encima y vas a pagar 1,500 de multa. Oye, pero ¿por qué si el permiso cuesta $30 y me vas a cobrar 1,500? Como que no concuerda, ¿verdad?, que una multa sea tan excesiva. Es un exceso demasiado, pero esto es parte de los gastos tan tremendos. El puente, el incremento del puente y lo que pagamos ahí en el puente de cruzar, todo esto se aúna y ahora pagar aquí. Se pensó, ¿verdad?, en los $75, en los $100 y todo. Mis clientes, ahorita estos 3 clientes que tengo, se me olvidó mencionar a Porteadores Bagdad y algunos otros clientes, y jamás he mencionado que represento la mayoría de los transportistas, represento unos cuantos transportistas. Esos transportistas me han pedido que les pidan que sean más cautelosos en cobrarnos esta entrada. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Nancy. Bueno. ¿Quién más?
That's all we have.
That's it? Okay.
Okay. We'll move back to the executive session items.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, do we have a motion to go into executive session? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. 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 Motion carries. Go into executive session right now. It's 5:55. Good evening. We're back from executive session. We're now in session. It's 6:20 p.m.
Okay. Item number 3, receive interim port director's report. I have just an update on our dredging project. On Thursday, we got some bad news that we had another turtle take, and that brought our turtles up to 6. The trigger point for the new regulations are 7 turtles, and it has to go to a review board, and that process takes several months to either one, they figure out if we need to shut down the operation altogether, or if we need to put more trawls, or try to work in a different way. So we were only about 63,000 cubic yards short of our goal. And with the surveys that the dredging vessel came up with, there were just a couple of peaks out there, and those peaks were at about 45 feet. So they thought with the vessel movement, once our vessels started coming back in, that they could get those peaks kind of moved out of the way. But the rest of the area was at 46 feet. We received late this afternoon surveys of the entire channel and forwarded those to Ray and to Grant, our pilot, and they were going to review those. So hopefully tomorrow we'll be issuing a new statement and lifting our draft restrictions back, hopefully back to the 39 feet. And that's depending on how the rest of the channel looks. This week, actually it was yesterday, today, and tomorrow, there's a conference in D.C. With the Corps of Engineers. It's a budgeting conference, and I was not able to go because of the board meeting, but we sent Randy DeLay up there, and Randy called me this morning, actually yesterday, to get some more information, and called this morning, and the Corps called to confirm we got $2.5 million more funding in our O&M budget for 07, which will allow us to bring back our LaQuay contract, our turning basin contract, to the full capacity and get the turning basin back to where it should be. And hopefully we'll have a little bit left over. And Randy and Glenn are still working on our 08 figures to try to get some money in there. And that way we can issue a continuing contract and get the work done on our entrance channel that we need done. And then hopefully we'll be back on schedule and in business. So that was very good news. Earlier this week, we had a visit, and George hosted the director of the FBI for the Homeland Security, having to do with the ports from Washington, D.C. She came down. Our port was one of 3 other ports in the country that she toured, and she met with some of our key tenants. Transmontane was one of the tenants that she met with, just basically getting an idea of what's going on in our port. So obviously that means that we're pretty high-profile port, and George took her around, gave her tours, and she had a very nice visit. We also met with the Coast Guard today in conjunction with that meeting about redoing our security plans and our security grant, so we're working on that. Just wanted to remind everybody that on March the 31st we have the Texas Clipper event. I don't think, and Raphael's here, I don't think it's ready to sink right now, but on the 31st we're going to have Texas Parks and Wildlife is putting on an event for that sinking, and we're going to have members of the actual crew, the first crew that ever served on that vessel. And I think everyone got invitations, but it's March 31st from 5 to 6, and ESCO Marine did all the remediation work on that vessel.
Historic event?
Where's it going to happen? Where's it going to...
At the Convention Center on South Pipeline.
It's going to be an interesting event. It's going to be mostly based on the historical tribute to the vessel back to when it was the Queens, and then it turned into a Texas Clipper. There's going to be a lot of alums there. And we're probably not going to be able to sink the vessel for another month or so. But it's going to be high profile.
It's going to be a high profile event. Yeah.
Good event.
Right. Okay.
I have to report.
Okay. Before we go on to item number 4, I'd like to see if we can bring on item number 9, because our Bridge Committee Chairman, Frank Parker, needs to be in Laredo this evening, and we can see if we can bring that up first.
But before we go there, may I
Yes, sir.
have you been talking to Randy also about possibly being proactive on getting the study done on the entrance of our ship channels, so that see why we keep having that reoccurrence, so we can fix it before it happens again?
I didn't talk to Randy, but actually when we had our public scoping meeting, and Carl Anderson, he's our project manager for the Corps of Engineers. He's the one that Hector is working with on our feasibility study. I talked to him at great length about it, and that is actually a component in our feasibility study for the deepening and widening, and he agreed to move that forward. I think that was actually scheduled in a later phase, but because we're having all these problems, they did agree to move that forward, and I believe that will be in the scope of work that we're conducting right now.
Fantastic.
Where's Debbie? Oh, great.
Vacation. No, she's at a seminar right now. She was on vacation last week.
Okay. Item number 9?
Okay, item number 9. Consider an action on proposals to conduct and update a feasibility study for the Port Bridge project as requested by the state of Tamaulipas.
Page 14.
Do you want to present this? You want me to present it? There in your packet, as I said earlier, the state has requested us to do a feasibility study to see if this bridge project once and for all has the merits to go forward, or if there's no merits, then it will be stopped at this juncture. Now, they've had several meetings, members of the Bridge Committee, I think Commissioner Cristiano, the chairman, have had several meetings with representatives from the state of Tamaulipas, and they have basically said that 2 companies would be capable of providing this study for us, and both those studies are in your backup. One is from a company that originally did the study for us, and the other is from a different company, but both are acceptable by the state. The one study is for $414,292. That's the company that actually did our original feasibility study, and the other is
97.
That I have no idea. I'm sorry, I don't know that. And the other is from a company, and that study is $110,000. And you know, there's quite a discrepancy in the price there, but I think the reason being that from the original company, they don't want to use the data of the old study. And the new company, the cheaper company, the gentleman who actually performed the study for the primary company is now a principal in the new company.
Right.
He knows it's good data, and he's willing to use the data and just update it. So that is the request before you.
But it's for $110,000.
$110,000, yes, sir. And they said that the study would take approximately 10 weeks to complete. So what the staff is recommending, what the Bridge Committee is recommending, there was a meeting with the Bridge Committee on the 15th, and we met from like 8:30 in the morning to almost till noon time, and they went over the proposals, and it was a recommendation of the committee at that time to choose the less expensive $110,000 study. And we have our chairman, Mr. Frank Parker here.
Parker, you want to step up and say something about that, sir?
Yeah, the committee met last week, and I mean, one of our charges for the bridge committee is to try to work for a bridge and as cheaply as possible. But I think for the long-term plan of the port, we need to know if we're going to have a bridge or not, because there's going to be issue in 2 years that 30-weight, 30-ton trucks are we're going to have to go back to Austin again, ask for this permit. We've got a governor right now in Tamaulipas that wants the bridge and is telling us if we do this, he's going to pay for half of the bridge. So I think this is a positive event, and it's also an event of a moment that this guy was not going to be there after 2 or 3 years. Let me see what else did I miss. So, I mean, we looked at the 2 bids. Of course, we think the other guy is less expensive because he's got experience from the first project. But we think that's reasonable. Should the study find that the bridge is financially viable, that brings into the question, I've had discussions with some commissioners about financing, how we're going to finance it. I mean, one of the things we've been kicking around on the committee would be to bring the county in as a partner. They know how to run a bridge. I think what we really need for the port is to have a bridge. We spend a lot of money on a bridge. I don't know that we need to own it, but I know that if we have one there, it's the location that what we've been trying to do. And then maybe the other funds that we would spend on the bridge, we could spend on services in the port and for the tenants of the port. The other discussions have been DOT would be put at the limits of the port instead of right at the bridge. So all the truck owners were complaining. I think it solves one of their problems. We also would have control over rates. I'm not saying that we should charge less than what the county charges, but we would have control over rates. And we don't know what would happen if we had to only load 20 tons here. I think the port should also do a study. What happens if we can only load 20 tons here? We need to know what happens if we can only load 20 tons here, and that's something that maybe should be in your other long-term goal plan that you have. But I think this plan sort of goes in part with your long-range study that you all are doing for uses of the port. It just seems the right timing for this component. And these are the only 2 companies that the governor said, well, not the governor, it's SCT, the Highway Department in Mexico would accept from these 2 firms. That's all I had to say. It was a unanimous vote on the board. The only member that wasn't there was Ken Schaefer, but I talked to him today. He said he was in favor of it also.
So that would be a total of 11 people in favor?
Well,
or 11 of the committee members? 6. Okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Parker.
Yes, sir.
I think it's an important, I mean, basically, if we don't have this study, the bridge project is dead. I had Donna pull some numbers regarding the overweight permits sold, and in 2005, there was 41,114 permits sold for a total amount of $1.2 million. In 2006, there was almost the same amount, 39,856 permits that were sold. So if we don't have this bridge on track, we may not get an extension on this overweight corridor. And basically, a lot of these companies, a lot of these trucking companies that are buying these permits are, going to ship elsewhere, because now it took 1 truck to ship. They're going to have 2 trucks to ship the same amount. So it's important that we continue pursuing this project, and I'm going to make the motion that we approve this item.
Second. Do you have any other comments?
Just some discussion, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me say that I created the Bridge Committee that Mr. Parker is chairman of. I appointed him as chairman and the other 5 members. And I greatly respect their opinions, and it's not easy to have a different opinion from the unanimous opinion of the committee that you created. It may be unprecedented, and it's not with any happiness on my part that I'm speaking out against something that a committee that I created is recommending. And I will say this: we all want this study to be positive. We want this study, if it's done, we want it to show that the project is feasible But I'm looking at it from a slightly different angle, and I've sent each of y'all an email today outlining my opinions. Commissioner Masso said that if we don't do this study, the bridge project is dead. In speaking today with Mr. Parker, and just before the meeting with Vice Chairman Cristiano put it slightly differently. He said that the first bridge project is dead. The issue now is whether there is a new bridge. And Mr. Parker said something similar to that today when we spoke. He said this is a new project. And I'm asking myself, have we ever decided that the first one is dead? When was the post-mortem? Who pronounced the patient dead on the operating table? It's a dose of reality that we're here now talking about a new bridge. When we met in the summer of 2005 as a board with companies like Halliburton, who were prepared to come down here and look at our bridge as a construction partner, one of the first things they asked us as a board was, where's the bankable study, Mr. Chairman? Where's the bankable study? That's another term for the same thing that we're talking here. And all of us kind of looked around the room and said, what the heck is a bankable study? Because nobody had ever done one. After $21 million, nobody had ever done a feasibility study. And Halliburton was prepared to do it at their expense. As recently as the late spring of 2006, when I was chairman, they were still corresponding with me, asking me about whether the B&D is interested in partnering with Halliburton. Once officers changed, I suspect that contact has ended. But they were prepared to pay for that bankable study, the same study that we're looking at paying for today. I kind of analogize this to a situation where a young couple, normally, when a young couple goes out and buys a house, they first look at their own pocketbook and decide how much of a house can they afford. And if they determine they can afford to buy a house, they have a price range in their own mind for what they can afford. And they go shop in those neighborhoods. Then the next thing that they normally do is they go to a lender, whether it's a bank or a mortgage company, and they ask the lender, how much will you approve me for? And they're given a budget. And then if they're able to afford it themselves, and if they're able to get approval from a lender, they put an offer down on a house. And they put an offer knowing what the cost of that house will be. Today, we're changing that around. We're putting $110,000 in earnest money, not knowing whether we can afford the house, because we could stand to lose that $110,000. So I have a prepared statement, Mr. Chairman, if I can have the liberty of reading why I'm voting against this. Perhaps it'll change some people's minds. Why I'm voting against a feasibility study. First, taxpayers are still recovering from the stunning and grim reality that not a dime of the $21 million spent on a non-existent bridge will likely ever be returned to the B&D. As it stands now, our only hope for recovering any money is that in the event formal criminal charges are brought, those found to be criminally responsible could be ordered to pay restitution to the B&D. Before paying for a feasibility study in Mexico, shouldn't we first do a feasibility study at the Port of Brownsville? It is irresponsible to fund a feasibility study without first having a fiscally sound plan to fund construction should the study conclude the bridge is economically feasible. No one has advanced such a plan. That is unfortunate and ill-advised, because this plan would answer important questions such as, number one, who is going to pay for this bridge? Number two, who will own it? Number three, what will taxpayers get or own in return for their $21 million that, according to the Brownsville Herald, is actually closer to $30 million? And number four, what percentage, if any, of the bridge tolls will taxpayers own, and will those tolls be used at some point in the future to relieve taxpayers of their current obligation to service the $21 million debt. Second, before taking even this first step, the prudent course would be to hear from our auditors and financial advisors, neither of whom, I would add, were consulted with before a majority of the board voted to accept $0 in settlement with DEC. To fail to do that is unconscionable. It appears this dangerous precedent will be repeated, as some now want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars now and millions of dollars later without first seeking the advice and counsel of this district's financial advisors and auditors. I know of no scenario, forecast, or projection under which the district could service the additional and significant debt to the district that this venture would entail. Relatedly, what other important pieces of infrastructure would this project choke off? This reckless course, if continued, runs the risk of plunging the district into financial ruin. What reasonably prudent business person would run their business in such a manner? It's also important to note that the cost of this feasibility study would be an entirely unbudgeted for expense, which would require a budgetary amendment if made. This just after unanimous passage of the budget at our last meeting on May 7th. In this regard, nowhere in the budget itself is the bridge or the bridge project mentioned, much less budgeted for or itemized. Moreover, the bridge is neither mentioned nor discussed along with other capital projects. On page 1 of the budget overview is the following sentence, quote, "The district staff has identified the construction of Dock 16 as one of its primary objectives for the coming years. To that end, excess operating funds will be transferred into a construction account set up for this purpose." There's no account set up for the bridge. Page 1 in the budget overview continues as follows. A second pressing need that has been identified is the need for a new liquid cargo dock to complement Oil Dock 5. The district has 5 current tenants who are utilizing Oil Dock 3, which is now in excess of 60 years of age. The staff is currently assessing the condition of the dock and will be initiating the repairs necessary to extend its useful life for approximately 3 years, while plans for a new oil dock can be prepared and implemented. The capital budget contains adequate funding to do the required site assessment and to prepare the specifications for the construction of this dock. On page 32 of our budget, which just passed at our last meeting unanimously, under the heading Capital Projects is the following. The project being given primary importance in fiscal year 2008, and that's the year that we're in currently, is the construction of Dock 16. The staff has identified this project as vital to the continued growth of the Port of Brownsville. As the port becomes more widely recognized as being able to accommodate deep draft vessels, it is seeing congestion at its one general cargo dock that handles deep draft vessels. The staff is seeking a mix of federal appropriations and conventional construction financing for this project, as well as soliciting a partner in a public-private venture to finance this new facility. Preliminary planning for this dock is being done so that the district can proceed with construction as soon as the financing is in place." Close quote. Again, nowhere is our bridge mentioned as a capital project or otherwise. I asked Interim Director Emard in open session on March 7th if she agreed with the staff that Dock 16 was the primary capital project for FY08. Her answer was yes, it was. I also noted that on page 14 of the agenda backup, there is a signature line for the district's financial director to sign, which would have indicated her approval of submission of this item to the B&D board. Her signature is conspicuously missing, and I understand she's not here today. Third, I would like the advice and counsel of a port director before setting on this course. Hopefully the port director who is ultimately hired will have had experience in the financing and construction of a major capital project and can therefore offer his perspective and guidance as to the most prudent and sound course of action. Right now, we simply don't have a person in-house who can offer this advice. When I created the 2006 Bridge Committee and appointed its 6 members, Mr. Chairman, 3 from the U.S. and 3 from Matamoros, expectations were quite high that the B&D would win its lawsuit against DEC and recover a substantial amount of money as damages. My plan, and that of my fellow commissioners, was to return that money to taxpayers through the district's operating account, thereby helping to fund construction of our bridge. I never, ever imagined that the port would dismiss its own lawsuit, much less agree to let Dannenbaum go scot-free without paying a dime in damages. Without that money to count on to help fund construction and give taxpayers an equity interest in the bridge, I am far less sanguine about proceeding with this project. In closing, I return to the spring of 2004 when towards the end of my campaign for commissioner, I ran an ad in the Brownsville Herald subtitled, quote, "We need honest answers to tough questions." This ad detailed the millions upon millions of dollars spent on a non-existent bridge, over $14 million of which was spent from March of 2000 to March of 2004. My ad concluded with the following. Again, I fully support the port bridge, but with full disclosure and an honest assessment of the cost. We must have strong leadership prepared to answer the tough questions and see that the job gets done properly. I believe those words then, believe them today, and they will guide me tomorrow. For all of these reasons and others which I don't need to go into at this time, I am respectfully voting against this. Mr. Chairman, I understand that Commissioner Massa has made a motion and that it's been seconded. In order to earn my vote, I would first want to hear from our financial advisors that hopefully when this study is completed and God willing it's found to be economically feasible, that our financial advisors tell us that we are able to afford construction. Even if this motion passes today, I would still hope that you would call for such a meeting with our advisors, because we do need to know what's down the road. We do need to know whether we can afford construction. So I will respectfully part company with our esteemed committee and its chairman, as well as my fellow commissioners, and given that the motion is to approve study at this time without hearing from our financial auditors and advisors, I must respectfully vote no.
With all due respect, and obviously I respect your opinion, the feasibility study, one thing that it will do for us is let us know exactly what we are going to be capable of acquiring. As far as, you don't go ask a bank for money for a business without a business plan. You have to let them know what you're planning on doing and how you came up with those numbers. Well, that's what the feasibility study is going to do. It's going to allow us to say, this is how many traffic you're going to be able to carry on this bridge. A very good point was how much we would lose in traffic if we lost the overweight corridor. Once we implement all those issues into our feasibility study, then we'll be able to sit down and figure out what are our opportunities. What do we need a private investor? Who are we going to partner up with? Is it such a great project we don't need a partner? I mean, I cannot say what the feasibility study is going to say. And honestly, and you said that you hope it's a positive outcome. I just want the most realistic feasibility report out there. If it's not a good project, in my eyes, as long as I know, there's no more project. If the feasibility study comes out negative, there's no reason for us to keep pursuing it. This is not. Look at it as a different era where we're not throwing good money after bad money. This is the first step of doing a feasibility study. What does it say? This is the first time we've ever partnered or with the state of Tamaulipas. We're further along now than ever before.
And you deserve credit for that. You deserve credit for that, Commissioner, for making that happen.
Thank you. And that's the biggest milestone we've gotten. Second, before now, we had never talked to the county about joining forces, and that has a lot to do with the Bridge Committee and a lot of things that they're bringing to the table. And let me tell you, we were in that meeting for, just to say, 3 hours, 3.5 hours, 4 hours, and the questions that were going out there were fantastic. It was a great move, going back and forth. To give you credit, it was a great committee, great bunch of individuals. The people that were involved are also on the Mexican side that actually are very close to, the mayor. They also voted to move forward. They also voted to move forward. And the question that was going out there were fantastic. It was a great move, going back and forth. The people that were involved are also in the Mexican side that actually are very close to the mayor. They also voted to move forward. And the question that was going out there were fantastic. It was a great move, going back and forth. The people that were involved are also in the Mexican side that actually are very close to, the mayor. They also voted to move forward. right now, and let me tell you, I believe that we should be skeptical. The public should be skeptical. The media should be skeptical. They should look at us with a fine comb and make sure that what we're doing is transparent and what we're doing is correct and the best way of doing it. And that's what we've been trying to do. And I think we're going the right track. I think we're being very transparent. I think we're showing everybody our cards, saying this is the first step. Whatever that feasibility study comes out, that's what it is.
This is a new project.
It is. You know, you can figure it out. You know, it was drowning. They're restating it. It's a new project. Call it whatever you want. You know, I mean, is it a new project? Well, not really, because we're using old information to help on the cost. You know, the feasibility study would have cost us, you know, the $414,000 if they were doing it from scratch, like one company wants to do it, and $110,000. Both of them are recognized by the federal government in Mexico, which would be SET, and that is certified by them. And both of them are recommended to us by the state.
If it was so important, Donna, why wasn't it included as a capital project?
Well, Mr. Zavaleta, as I told you when we presented that budget, that those capital projects could change. I mean,
but
all that is...
The word doesn't even appear.
Well, because we didn't have... I mean, when we were preparing that budget, we were right... The lawsuit had just settled. The commissioners had not voted on moving forward with the project, not to move forward with the project. I mean, realistically, when we did the budget, I mean, the staff had no direction on how to proceed with the project. That budget is a working document. At any time, you can amend that budget.
We have, as a board, we haven't voted on Oil Dock 3, and yet it appears here.
That's a wish list. That is our wish list.
The bridge doesn't even appear.
No, it doesn't.
On the question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Ready for a vote?
Oh, I'm still discussing this.
Let me just interject here, Michelle. I think we've heard enough, and I think, in all honesty, that it's a good day and it's a sad day on my part by listening to everybody come out and talk about the bridge project. I have been involved with the bridge project since I began here on the sidelines and meeting with the bridge consultant as well as meeting with the bridge committee. And you did do a good job by putting these very well-minded individuals, and they have their best interests at heart to do not only for the Port of Brownsville but for Matamoros as well. But the idea that, a defunct project, all these millions of dollars that you keep reiterating and bringing back up, we need to move forward. The authorities have taken issue and let them do their job. Let's do our job and put the port where it needs to be. We don't want to be spinning our wheels on dead water.
I understand that.
So with that being said, we have talked about the state of Tamaulipas has agreed that they're going to pay the $110,000. So we're going to pay $110,000. Let me finish, please. We're going to pay the $110,000. And the state says that they will consider paying for the costs associated with developing the project in Mexico, and they're even willing to reimburse the port $110,000. Going forward, if the state pays for the studies and plans in Mexico, that could be approximately $2.5 million.
My understanding of the language was that they would consider.
That's correct. But it's all about. Let me just as transparent as it can be. It's about doing the feasibility study. Once the feasibility study is done, depending on what we get out of that feasibility study, okay, if it's a very positive feasibility study, the state of Tamaulipas will jump on board and they will consider doing those things.
We'll make that claim.
That will be their call. I mean, it's a negotiation.
We will make that claim. We'll ask to be reimbursed.
We will be I've been asking to get reimbursed for a long time. But the point being is we need to, the first step is to do a feasibility study. Let's see what that tells us. Second step is if it's negative, we know what we have to do. If it's positive,
we capped our losses at 100%.
That's right. And if it's positive, then that's when more of the real work starts, and that's starting to figure out how we're going to pay for it. Is Mexico and it's all about how the study comes out. Once right now, telling you that it's going to happen, they've said it, but you know what? And you as a lawyer know, until it's in writing, But the fact is, it can happen.
Is it in the contract? that they will consider reimbursing it?
Yes, it is. But we have to figure that out. So I urge you, from my perspective, that I think you should really reconsider how you're voting on this, because I think this is philosophically, it's a little different. It's getting the business plan, getting ready for the bank.
Here's where I am, Commissioner. I will vote no against this, but I will be hoping and praying that it comes back positive, and I'll be hoping and praying that we can afford to build it. How about that?
Fantastic.
Finally, I'd just like to close with this, that the best thing about this is that the state of Tamaulipas has embraced this project. And as before, as you well know, you reiterate over and over again about the failed bridge project. The people who were running that program before, they were doing things totally different than the way they're being done now. The state of Tamaulipas was left out in the loop. We have them at the forefront. They're the ones that are embracing this, and that's why we have, it's a new day for us here, and things are going in the right direction. That being said, we have a motion on the table by Commissioner Masso, seconded by Commissioner De Los Santos. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay.
Mr.
Motion
Chairman,
carries.
and let's keep the Bridge Committee active, especially the three members from Matamoros.
Yep. Oh, they are, sir. They are.
Item number 4.
You should do 10.
Okay.
Oh,
Item number 4.
Item number 4, consider an action on the following consent agenda items. A, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of March 7th, 2007. B, approval to authorize payments of $25,000 or greater. Item number 1, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas. It's a monthly premium payment for the employee and dependent health insurance due on April the 1st in the amount of $42,848.27. Item number 2, Siemens Financial Services, Inc. It's a monthly lease and rental payment for the mobile harbor crane due on April the 18th of 2007 in the amount of $28,564.75.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion on the table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay. Item number 5, receive update on master plan by Rich Tubner of Black and Beach. We asked Mr. Tubner just to come and give us an update on the progress of our master plan, and there were several items on the agenda that had to do with things that the master plan folks are working on, so he's going to give us an update on those projects. Yeah, just one, yeah.
Good evening, Chairman, Commissioner. Good to see you again. Good to be down in this neck of the woods. Nice to have a steady, temperate climate. Dealing with snow and 80 degrees and snow and a couple days later. I wanted to give you an update on where we're at right now and where we're planning on going, the time frames on the master plan. We've been working on it for several months now. And the process update that I'm going to speak to will be 3 sections. I talk about general issues, what we've done so far, and some of the points that have come out of those discovery items, the assessments and analysis. And talk about this power plant and the process it's going to take to develop a good business case for bringing a viable, opportune, and funded power plant into the port. Third, we're going to have a discussion not on the history of the land bridge, not on the feasibility study, but kind of like a general overview of the process as we see it. Black and Beach is an international company. It's done projects from China through Australia, Mexico, and there's a fairly good understanding of what it takes to accomplish a major project like this. And Ann Harris from our power division is here to speak to that topic. And again, we're not going to repeat any kind of issues that were brought up in the previous part of the session. Master plan, what we've done so far, we've had an infrastructure assessment. We've assessed the conditions present in the port. There's a wastewater, and pieces of this are the wastewater plant assessment. That piece has not been done. April 2nd, that's the schedule for the wastewater plant assessment. The security program, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a couple minutes here, and then a lease and tariff analysis. We assessed the traffic conditions in the port. We did a traffic study at the port, and that traffic study looked at a number of things. It looked at the efficiency of the road structure within the port and external to the port. In addition to that, it also looked at the maritime use, the maritime channels, and how that part of the system is working. And so it is it's a multimodal facility operation, and all aspects of it need to work efficiently together. There are some significant findings that came out of that, and those noted problems within the traffic infrastructure within the port are at your intersections, and as Norm probably can allude to, at the rail crossings. There's some degradation to the rail bed structure, and there is a definite wear pattern at the intersections from the heavy loads crossing. As part of our recommendations, we're going to look at the different types of infrastructure improvements that will aid with the least cost to the port, will aid in keeping those road beds in place and for future use over the next 5-10 years while the rest of this plan is developed. Dock conditions. And this topic is going to get into another probably a contentious issue, which is Dock 16. In this assessment that was done, there was some real critical needs identified in the maritime infrastructure of the port. You spoke to the fuel docks earlier. There's transit shed problems. There's some other significant investment requirements that the port's going to need to grow. To move forward, we need to have a good foundation. And that foundation is your roads, is the rail, is your sewage, and all the other utility aspects of the port. And that's some of the things that you're going to find that we're going to need to focus on. The report, we're in the process of drafting the report now from our assessments. And the port should be receiving the draft copy somewhere around April 15th, which will have our recommendations, both in the traffic concept and the efficiencies of the highway piece of it, and then the wharf structure also. Again, phase one, just to reiterate, phase one of our master plan, our 4-part master plan process is just looking at the here and now. How are things operating now? What are the capacities? What are the problems? What are the bottlenecks? What do we got to do to grow the port? Wastewater utilities, electrical utilities. This assessment is going to start on April 2nd, and we're going to look at your 3 sewage plants and what the physical conditions and also all the permit requirements on those sewage plants. There's 1 industrial and 2 residential plants operating on the port. And again, there is an opportunity here to partner with public-private partnership like you spoke to earlier, and partnering with the Public Utilities Board to grow a regional wastewater concept here and be a part of it. And that's one of the things that we're going to look at, and we're going to make recommendations that we, based on the physical assessment, which I can't speak to because it hasn't happened yet. But that's where we're going with that part of the utility. And again, the same thing's going to happen with the T&D infrastructure, the transportation distribution of power. Again, that's a vital part of growing the port. You can't bring an industry in here if you can't support it with basic utilities.
Rich,
and
does electrical utility there include potential coal-fired?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Security. We completed a facility security assessment and updated some significant portions of the port's security plans, security program. And we put together a round 7 grant package, which I think looks fairly strong as an argument for approval. We're one of about 30 candidate ports for about $30 million, but I don't know how many people are applying. That infrastructure package is looking at a command and control intelligence and communication infrastructure that a normal city would have, and that's what we got to equate this to the developing city. And that's part of our infrastructure, is to have command and control, common operating picture, so that your security staff or the port operations personnel can identify who's on the port, what's going on, what are the plans for tomorrow, and what bottlenecks do we have coming in. And you can't stick your finger in the dike every time there's a problem, you've only got so many fingers. Lease and tariff. This is some very pointed results on this, and they're easy to identify how we're going to. It's probably not going to be a very popular topic, but we've done the analysis on the lease program. We're presently analyzing the tariff structure. The initial analysis of the lease structure showed that there is a almost 24-year backlog in escalation. And the rates that are being charged just as a nominal figure are about 147% undervalued. That means that one of your primary sources of income is you're losing about, you're only getting about a third or less of what you should be getting from your leased properties, and that's part of your infrastructure. That's how you're going to fund your expansion. Again, the tariff analysis is being completed, and there's some recommendations that I'll be in the report on the 15th. The lease analysis was complete, recommendations were made, and now they're working on the new lease structure. So that recommendation was made earlier. Now we get to the power plant. It's come up as a topic. It's come up by talking with Eduardo from the PUB. He's made some pretty good overtures to us to start thinking about this, not only from the master plan concept, but Black and Beach its core business is power. So there's a few issues that PUB owns the T&D systems within the port, transmission systems for power. They don't supply the power, they supply a portion of it, but not all of it. But there is growth going to happen in and around the port that they need a source of efficient and cost-effective power. Coal-fired power plant is a good opportunity. The port has some significant advantages, and it's a viable project just because it's a port area. You got all the water you need for cooling. One of the byproducts that the coal-fired power plant makes is CO2. That's one of the biggest concerns about having a coal-fired power plant. Well, one of the developing issues offshore is several fields that are going to be opening over the next 6 months. They require CO2 for their drilling operations. So that's something that they're going to need is over the next 10 years, 15 years, is a supply of CO2. It's another, it shows that cogeneration concept where not only you're providing the power for the port and you're selling the power to the grid, you're also bringing coal over the dock, so that's another revenue generation. And then there's a vast interest in a situation where it's effective on all points.
So CO2 is a waste product of the coal
yes,
farm?
That's the biggest.
And it's a commodity itself?
Yes. And there's different ways, there's different concepts out there right now that are marginally working. They have a capture system that's inside, it's a sleeve they put inside the smokestack that kind of sucks it up, and then they have to replace it every so often. And then there's the concept where you pump it underground, and then it slowly dissipates. This is a good use of CO2. I mean, it's something that they need. They don't have a source of supply in the area. It's a commodity that's going to be needed by Shell and Pemex and a lot of these other companies. Amerada has. If you look, there's a process. It's just processes, procedures. It's another tried and true process. Black Beach has, I don't know, how many would you say, Ann, over the last 5 years has been through the feasibility portion of a power plant, a major power plant?
Well, that's what I think is first step for almost everybody.
We're talking probably 50 projects worldwide over the last 3 or 4 years that have gone through this process where you identify project ownership, work with the PUB, do a private-public partnership, identify somebody that going to get an equity share in this thing that can come in and fund it, and we'll run it. And the port might, and you might, I mean, we'll make recommendations on it, but I can't see the port wanting to operate a power plant. It just doesn't, that's not your business. So that's all part of this process. You got to identify all the business case where you got to assess the market. A lot of this has been done by the PUB. The PUB is going to have some very good inputs to this. Feasibility study, again, it's right there. It's right up front. Financial model. How are you going to get this thing off the ground, and how are you going to fund the construction and then the operation of the plant? Bring in partners, identify opportunities, and sell those opportunities. Preliminary engineering. To get this thing as a feasible project, you got to do some kind of concept design. You got to have a design to sell the permitting, to run through the permitting process. You got to have something in your hand, and so on and so forth. It ends up in financing and project development. And then with that, Ann's going to talk to the. I don't want to belabor this anymore. And as far as the power plant, our power division has requested, and that's where I got a lot of the information from, has requested an opportunity to come and speak to the port in depth on how do you get a project up and rolling. They see value in this. They see it as a viable project, and we want to kind of present the process in a little bit more detail.
Don't y'all already do work for the PUB, though?
We already do work for the PUB. We already do work for AP. We already do work for SEMPRA, and so on and so forth.
I would want to have advice from somebody that's just representing us, on that partnership deal.
Well, you would be just representing us.
Well, if he's doing work for the PUB as well,
you aren't currently not currently. No.
That's what that's because you said Eduardo had contacted you.
We asked Eduardo
through us. We're talking to him about these projects.
We've asked Eduardo to attend several of our master plan meetings, just so that we
He was on the committee.
Align with the.
That's right.
He was on the master plan committee.
That's right.
And we've had discussions, and he's very
So you're not currently representing the PUB?
No, not at all. Not at all.
And the reason that this came up in the beginning is because of the desal plant.
Right.
Because this could work in conjunction with the desal plant to make the desal plant cost effective when combined with this to have
the desal plant.
Yeah.
They've got an underlying goal here, because to get the desal plant, you're going to need power, and you need a significant amount of power. And this is one way to bring in the power, is to make it part of the port's growth. So I think it's a win situation all around. And if we have an ethanol plant come in, which it is a conceptual project right now, that's going to need 30 megawatts of power to keep that thing up and running. Now, this can be able to co-generate some of its own feed and then sell some back to the grid, but just to get it up and running and to have the utility feed to keep it in a nominal capacity, they need to have a dedicated power supply, which they don't have right now. And that's Gulf Coast ethanol.
As Rich said, my name is Ann Harris. I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk to you for a few minutes this afternoon. And one of the things I wanted to explain is, why I'm here, what my background is. But I head up our environmental services for our energy division at Black and Beach. And the things that we're responsible for are getting big projects implemented and permitted and ready for construction. So a lot of the principles that you're going to need to apply to your bridge project, I think, are similar to the kinds of things that we do on an ongoing basis. My background is primarily environmental. I'm not an engineer. I'm also an environmental attorney. And we have a large staff of people at Black and Beach who are responsible for getting these kinds of things done in conjunction with many partners. Have, as I said, over 25 years of experience in doing this, so hopefully a few of the things that I will say, they sound like common sense, but believe me, it's the kind of thing that we have to always remember if you want to have a big project succeed. See if I can find the right button here. Again, all of you in the room, I'm sure, are more knowledgeable than I about this bridge project, but it is an interesting situation in that it has a long history. Many people have been involved, many entities. There are approvals here on both sides of the border. There are things that have been done at different time frames, and I think one of your challenges, if the feasibility study is a positive outcome, and if you want to move forward with this, getting some sort of feel for what the status of all these pieces and parts is really critical. Are the permits still valid and so forth? So I think until that's done, it's awfully difficult to have a rounded plan for moving forward. I always come up with a process because it is a process, and with respect to my personal experience, I've been in charge of getting a 1,000 megawatt power plant up in Oswego, New York. Just finished two large 230 kV transmission lines in Maryland and in Washington, D.C. with 2 EISs, 72 permits apiece, and so forth. So these are very large efforts. They go on over a period of years, and they have many entities participating. So we do have a process that we have to implement, and on every project it's a little bit different. But those are some of the key steps. Certainly there are not all of them here, but I wanted to put conceptual design first because I really see that as something that needs to get nailed down. You know, whether you go with your original, rail and highway, or whether you just do the road project first. But the point of conceptual design is it then dictates everything else. I mean, what are you going to build, and where is it going to be? And that means then what permits do you need on the U.S. side, on the Mexican side? You already have them. Are they still valid? So that is something that's very, very critical, and you want to get that nailed down and try not to change it, because the minute you do, you're going to have issues with some of these other activities that you have to do to get the whole project done. Let's go down to step 5 for just a minute, and I'll talk about the team in a minute, but this, there's a big phrase, I think Hillary Clinton wrote a book, it takes a village, but it really does. This is going to require expertise from many, many areas. So identifying that team is a very, very critical step for you when, if you move forward with this. The last thing, and again, I'll talk about this again in just a second, the issues and impediments and challenges. I think a lot of people really don't want to face up to this, but you're going to have issues. You're going to have people who don't want it. You're going to run into problems, and you need to anticipate those things and have kind of a game plan or plan B to the extent possible. It's like a lot of things. Do the thinking up front, because if you do, you have a big concept, you know you're going to run into these things. What might we do about it? Even if, if it doesn't happen, that's great, but be realistic about what you're getting into. I already talked about conceptual design, but let's go down to the third bullet, and if you'll have a lot of engineering studies and drawings and so forth, and that will totally dictate the type of permits and approvals. They're not all environmental. I mean, there are many local permits and so forth. So you'll have a lot of different people participating in that. And the last bullet, as I said before, if you start changing things, it has a real ripple effect on a lot of the work that might have already been done. Sometimes you have to change the design. They get out there and they discover that the substrate isn't right, they can't do it the way they said. I mean, that's a reality of an engineering project of any kind. But you just have to always understand what the implications are, and that's why that team has to be together all the time, meeting and communicating, so that everybody's up to speed on what's going on. Part of this process does involve doing a complete, not just permitting assessment, but in this case, look at the governmental approvals and agreements that you're going to have to make this project a reality. And the way we do our process is that you want to identify everything that you're going to need. And you don't do it along the way. You do it up front so that you have the list, so you know what you're getting into. You want to know what information you need to get all the things that you need. How long does it take to get them? How long does it take you to get through the process once you submit, whether it's a request to the Mexican government or, an updated presidential permit or a new Corps permit, whatever you need, but you have to factor that whole thing. We do giant schedules that have, many, many pieces and parts so that we know, all the things that are needed and, when they have to be done, so the engineers can start construction on the date that they want to start construction, or the client wants to start construction. Again, you know more than I do about this, but there are so many governmental approvals that you're probably going to need, and you need, high-level skilled people, probably with good diplomatic skills, good relationships, a true understanding of, both sides of the table in terms of, what the concerns are going to be, and some realistic expectations for how long it's going to take to get all those things in place in order to have, the kind of cooperation that you've been talking about today. And that all goes in that giant schedule I was talking to you about. I mean, it can't be exact, and things will happen along the way, but you want to you need to do that because you need to know when you're in trouble. You need to be able to say, we got this much time for this activity, but, we're hung up over here for some reason or other. Then start deploying forces to get that fixed, because if you look forward, it's starting to impact everything else, and things end up taking a lot longer than you ever imagined. I wanted just one slide on the key team members, because one of the things that we typically do, I would say the last big project I did, there were 15 different team members. There were 8 sub-consultants, 2 law firms. The client, of course, is always a big team member. There were the engineers. There was an archaeologist. So, all of those entities have a hand and have a role in making the project a success. And each of those entities has to be fully committed, fully engaged. They have to be, have their feet held to the fire with respect to doing their part. And if that doesn't happen, you will not have a successful project. And that kind of leads me to another point I'd like to make. One of the things I think is the most difficult for everybody is to really face up to the kinds of things that could serve as impediments to the project. And some of them are kind of unavoidable. If you run into a difficulty with respect to a study, you find something that you didn't anticipate, you have to take extra time, endangered species or whatever, or an engineering study might reveal that you have a difficulty with the area in which you wanted to build a facility, those kinds of things. But you also have to face up to, the opposition. And people want to avoid talking to the opposition at the outset. The way we do it is, and you mentioned the word scoping meeting, but I think that's a term of art, but, get everybody in a room. Be up front. Tell them what you're going to do. Let them have a hand in the process. I mean, people want to feel that they've been consulted, and I've been to many hearings, believe me, many people there. And in the end, a lot of times it really is, can I see the power plant stacked from my house? Can I get down my road when you're going to build it? I mean, some things are kind of minor. Other things are very, very serious and so forth. But, you can forge relationships. You can give something to get something. You can negotiate up front. But most of all, people, I think, really appreciate being involved in the process, having an opportunity to be heard, having an opportunity to express their concerns, and sometimes you realize that they're just really confused. So, plan the process out. Make sure you have all the right information about what you're going to do. Be realistic about what the impacts might be and how you might address them. A lot of people now are forging relationships with environmental organizations. I don't know if you watch the paper, but the Sierra Club's been fighting Iatan. It's a big coal-fired power plant right near Kansas City. And finally, they said they would quit fighting it if, and I think the agreement was 400 megawatts of wind power. There were some other concessions on another power plant that utility owns in terms of putting on controls and so forth. So who would have ever thought? And of course you probably all followed the Texas issue where I think they had another agreement with the Sierra Club, and now instead of TXU building 11 new coal plants, they're not going to build but 3, but they're going to do other things to serve the electrical needs. But the point is the lawsuits are there, and it's going to happen. But if you are cognizant of how those things have been resolved, there are ways to address the concerns of the organizations that would be against it, and perhaps come out with a win-win for everybody. I just put a couple of examples up here of some recommendations, and I keep making this point over and over again, but the schedule for moving forward is probably one of the most critical things that you can ever do, and that really involves all that upfront planning. We call it the permitting assessment for a project, say the bridge project. It would probably have another name because it involves so many government approvals, but you know, again, that step happens up front. You look way down the line. You might have to look down the line 4 or 5 years. And you do that to try to do everything you can to plan out to the finest detail that you're able to at the time, so that you know what you're getting into and you know when you're getting behind. I want to go almost right to the second to the last bullet. Another thing that I think is very critical to the success of a very big project is that you must have a leader of all the entities. And to me, the formula for disaster is, you know, you have this consultant over here doing something, and you have this engineer doing something, and you have this law firm, and they're not on the same page, and they're over here. And a lot of people mean well, but they're not connected. And the way we run these big projects is there's a leader. That leader tends to always report to the client in the business that I'm in. I mean, the client's really the leader, but someone has to be in charge of all the other entities doing things, and because they're all connected. And when this one gets behind, it affects the other 10 or however many there are. So it's a very, very critical thing to have that entity or individual empowered to really keep track of all the parts and pieces. Some of these big projects, we have scheduled conference calls twice a week. There's an action item list. You know, every single entity is reporting. Deliverables are due, and they're due on this date, and don't tell me they're not going to get done. You know, things happen. You try to be understanding if it's a real problem that someone's running into, but generally speaking, people react very well to expectations if you make them very clear. But you have to have that concert going on. Sometimes you could compare it to, cooking a giant meal for hundreds of people, but the bottom line is you've got a lot of things going on, and they all need to come out at the same time so that you have the permits you need, the government approvals, the negotiations that you need at the local level, so that you can have a project that, for the most part, people feel pretty comfortable with. You have the things that you need. You're not going to have problems at the end discovering, unfortunately, that somebody completely dropped the ball and everything's ready to go, but you're missing this piece. So again, Rich just asked me to come and talk about this, but we've been very successful over many, many years in getting large projects through this type of process. Again, the engineering is a little bit separate, but on the permitting end, that's a big part of what we do. It's kind of a symbiotic relationship because all of the applications require a significant amount of engineering input. So we work closely with engineers, and law firms really do have a big role in some of these projects in that, there are specific things perhaps at the local level. A lot of our projects require an approval from a state public service commission, and there are law firms that kind of specialize in those processes, so, they're a good member of the team. Other times when you have a lot of hearings that are a part of the process, then you have to have law firms taking all the public comments and collating them and coming up with finalized documents and answers to all the questions that you get from the public. So I think it's very doable, but there really is a methodology. Not every company works like Black & Deach, but I can assure you that this has worked for us for many years, and it's one way to approach a project like this if indeed your feasibility study looks like this is a direction you need to move into. Really kind of all I really wanted to say tonight. You have a lot of things on your agenda. Do you have any questions of me? Or
Thank you. Gentlemen?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Very enlightening.
Item number 6, consider an action on development of white paper on hope.
I'm sorry. I did have a question. Where did Ann go? Ann? You know, in a lot of the presentation that you gave us right now has a lot of different topics, you know, dealing with, you know, maybe partnering with PUB, not partnering, but the coal power plant with PUB and getting information back and forth and so forth. In the master plan, are you all getting together to make sure that our master plan is cohesive with what the city of Brownsville is doing and so forth? I know that they're right now in the process of doing a master plan as well.
We spoke with the chairman on my last visit about doing that. Donna and I briefly spoke about that concept, and we're open to it. It's just a matter of getting the right venue to do it. Right now, we're just in the assessment portion. It's a 4-phase process. The third phase of this process is where we act on the recommendations. The second phase is where we give an economic analysis of the recommendations that we include. We need to bring in the other entities, the city and the PUB, that are looking at developing this regional wastewater concept, and any of the other bridge projects, stuff like that. Needs to get back and forth. There needs to be communication both ways on that, so that we're all talking a growth for the region and something that's good for everybody, rather than we're competing against somebody for either funding or for revenue sources.
Because I know that we as an entity we're very fortunate to be in an area where we've actually created a kind of a cohesive regional mindset with the county and PUB and the RMA and the city and so forth. And I just think it's real important that we really consider bringing in their master plan and making sure that we...
I agree.
Okay, good.
And PUB has been involved in some of the early scoping meetings that we had developing the process that we're using right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rich.
Okay. Item number 6, consider an action on development of white paper on coal-fired power plant and creation of study group.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for putting this item on the agenda. As all of us know, at the February 20th, 2007 joint meeting between the district, Cameron County, and the city of Brownsville, the general manager and CEO of the PUB, Mr. Brusiak, spoke of the desire to build coal-fired power plants. And this is something that is the first time that I've heard him speak about this publicly. He and I had spoken about this privately in a very informal setting, I think in an aisle at HEB actually, about this time last year, and I think I've had some conversations about this with some of the board members, but as I say, very casual and very brief. But it was good to hear Mr. Brusiak speak about this for the first time in public. I would like to know more about this technology. I did a little bit of research today, and according to one report, 50% of the power generated in the United States last year was from coal-fired power plants. I realize that this has potentially huge environmental issues and ramifications, but in order to be proactive, I would like a white paper developed by our staff that would study issues such as whether there's a need for such a plant here, who would such a plant serve, understanding that taxpayers in Los Fresnos, Olmito, and Rancho Viejo, as well as Brownsville, pay taxes to this district. Would we be able to provide them with lower cost utilities? Whether such a plan is feasible, there's that word again, and environmental and related considerations. I would also like to see, Mr. Chairman, that you create a study group who would be empowered or charged with the task of developing expertise in this area so that the entire board can be better equipped to make sound, informed business decisions. As both of our presenters touched upon today, should this be feasible and should it be something that the board wishes to embark on, this partnership, if it is indeed a partnership, could represent a significant new revenue stream for the Port of Brownsville. So I would recommend that we, and I'm so moved, that we staff develop a white paper and that a study group be created and appointed.
And I just have one...
Go ahead, Ms. Jean-Marc.
I'm just wondering who in our staff is qualified to put those things together. I mean, because that's a pretty big undertaking, as you saw from that presentation. I mean, that's a feasibility study. And I don't know who on our staff is qualified to do that.
Go ahead, Carlos.
I was just going to say that I think they're already looking into
Yeah,
that, and
yeah.
I don't see why
Absolutely.
we need to
Yeah.
Be
create
redundant.
and have our
Yeah.
our port staff spending a lot of time on this issue when they're already looking at it and they're going to present it to us in the master plan. That's number one. Number two is we have this joint committee from members of the county, of the city, and from the board, PUB
as well,
from the
RMA.
board. There was another one, right? Was it the
RMA.
school district? RMA? Okay. I think we can address that as well through that group.
I'm talking about how the port could benefit. I'm not talking about the partnership. I want somebody to give us advice as to how this would be, if not in our best interest. I don't.
Okay. Well, we have our.
I believe the master plan would address
Yeah, I
that.
think that's already getting addressed.
If that's going to be adequately covered.
Oh, it's a big piece of it. Again, right now, we're just in the assessment phase. In Phase 3, which we haven't wrote the scope for.
Step up over here, Rich, please. Yeah, we haven't written the scope yet
We
of
haven't
Phase
written the scope for it, because it's dependent on the results of Phase 1, which is it's a conditional assessment of the port, and the utility aspects, of the wastewater, electrical, and then the economic analysis of feasible cargoes and land uses. After we have those two pieces of the package, we'll give you recommendations. Those recommendations will have power in them, and the development of these projects that we're looking at right now and that are actually on the doorstep of the port require a significant investment in utility items.
And part, and please correct me if I'm wrong, part of what Black and Veatch could add to this is when we get to the Phase 3, identifying the projects we need, you can also connect us with partners, financial partners, that could help the process move along.
That's all part of this process that Ann and I were both alluding to, is the formation of the team, the identification of your financial backing, delivering a business case that will bring that equity into the project, because you don't have the equity here. And you do have a capability to bond and other items, and you have a revenue stream. But there's other people that are looking to invest in a blossoming industrial area like this.
And you did mention you had experience in this area, right? In the power business?
That's Black and Veatch's core business.
The core business.
Of our $3 billion revenue, I'd say probably 70% comes from power.
Part of what, I know you all did a study for PUB. Did you all hit on this, the coal power plant with them, or are you liberty to talk about?
That was a water rate study, and that's...
Okay, totally different, okay.
It's totally different.
But didn't you do the permitting for their one of their
Gas
plants?
plant,
Yeah.
yes. I think it's probably been about 10 years ago that plant came online, but it's kind of unusual, I guess. But our group did the permitting for the plant, plus we then have helped them through the years with some of their environmental compliance requirements. I think they have staff members who handle that, but for a number of years we helped them get other permits, do EPA plans, fill plans, the other kinds of things that they need there. So we're familiar with them as the client asked.
There's also a variety of feedstocks available, not just coal. There's petroleum coke, which is another option, and it's just as available as coal, just as cheap. It'll come in bulk.
We get it right now. We get it right now, yeah.
That's another feedstock that could go into this, and that's the trade-offs that we were talking about. There's natural gas. You have natural gas available on port property. There's a bunch of natural gas going to be coming ashore here. So there's a give and take with, you identify in your risk equation where are your vulnerabilities, and you have to come up with alternatives. And maybe coal is your singular number one alternative, but you have other ones out there that you can bring in, and in your negotiation process, you might need to identify some other options so that you do get buy-in from everybody within the community.
I'd just like to add that with the study that you folks are doing and the historic meeting that we had with the city, the county, and the RMA and the Port of Brownsville recently on the 20th of February, there was a consensus amongst all the entities that we're going to have 2 staff members that are going to be working together with this big group, and with the 2 members here at the port, eventually all these members will come together and work with you on hopefully coming and bringing closure on this as well.
Mr. Chairman, in light of the fact that the master plan, especially in light of today's presentation, that you will address the potential for this industry at our port, I'm willing to. I certainly don't want to go out and hire somebody if we don't have anybody in house.
Yeah.
So I'm certainly willing to withdraw my motion and to just wait for Phase 3 of their report. I hope that's not too late. When is that going to be completed, Rich? Phase 3.
We're looking, they're all 6 months, but the economic analysis is probably the shortest of them, so we might be starting that in the fall.
Okay.
It's also dependent on the funds.
Right. And let's make sure that we scope that to include the coal-fired. Okay. I'll withdraw my motion.
You want to withdraw your motion?
I'll withdraw my motion,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Good enough. Next item, please.
Item number 7, consider an action on assignments, negotiations, easements, subleases, and contracts in general. Item A, Deep South Tex Terminals, LP, authority to negotiate.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Deep South Tex Terminal is situated right in this area, and they're wishing to expand additional, and they'd like to lease this land here across the street. So therefore, I'm asking the board to give me authority to negotiate for this additional.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item B, Gulmar Inc., Esco Marine Inc., authority to negotiate.
Yes, Gulmar is in the process of selling their improvements to Esco, and this is Gulmar right here, Esco's right here, and we were also working on an amendment to or a new lease to Gulmar on this area here. So the authority to negotiate for the additional would be to amend Esco's lease to add all of Gulmar's present area and all the additional areas that we were negotiating with Gulmar.
Daniel?
Well, actually, I thought the discussion had been an assignment of the Gulmar lease to ESCO. At some point in the future, there might be a consolidation of those leases. But we did have a meeting about this. Isn't that correct?
Assignment, not a
It
new
would
lease.
actually be an assignment of Gulmar's existing lease.
I believe we discussed some modification to some language in the...
That's correct. That's correct. There might be a small modification.
You're asking just for authority to negotiate those assignments.
Well, I was asking for authority to negotiate, but Daniel's saying it's an assignment of the lease, so...
It would be to negotiate the terms under which we would approve the assignment of that lease.
Sure.
So moved.
Second. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item C, Ramon Mendez, authority to negotiate.
Yes, Mr. Mendez has a grazing lease with us, and he's asking to lease the remainder of this area in here. He leases a land from this private landowner, and he leases land from the port here, and he'd like to lease this property. I'm asking the board to give me a
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 8, possible actions on matters or items discussed in executive session. None?
Okay.
Item 10, consider an action on contracting Silva Auditing and Silva LLC to supervise and coordinate the bridge project in Mexico. That item is presented in your packet. The contract was not actually available at the time. Daniel helped to, or not helped, he did the contract. But in the meeting on March the 15th, it was a recommendation of the Bridge Committee to hire Mr. Silva and to oversee just the feasibility process, the feasibility study process. The committee instructed Mr. Renfro to prepare a contract based on time and expenses not to exceed $30,000. Mr. Renfro was in the process of preparing the contract. He has prepared the contract. We sent it out to the commissioners for your review, and we also sent it out to the Bridge Committee for their review. And I'm sorry that Mr. Parker left, but they did have a chance to review that contract, and I got no comments back.
And the committee recommended approval of
It was over, yes, all, the committee did.
Okay, I'll make the motion to approve this item.
Second.
Just a second. The expense for this stage will be it will be capped at $30,000? How does that, exactly does that work?
Well, the one thing that we do not have from him yet, as I understand it, he's approved the contract in principle. We do not have his hourly rate
Yes,
yet.
he sent that, Daniel.
Oh, I have not seen that.
Yeah, he sent that.
Is the contract that's open for motion, is that capped at $30,000?
Yes,
Yes.
it would be a time and expense not to exceed.
Not to exceed.
Let me just give you, basically, we are trying to be so transparent, so exact in things. We didn't want to just do a open, charge us per the hour. So basically, he broke it down on what it would be, and basically it was capped at $30,000, meaning if he has to take more trips to Mexico, and that's on your ticket.
Actually, what happened was that his proposal was a flat fee of $30,000.
And that was rejected.
And the members of the committee said, no, we'll pay you your normal rate plus expenses, not to exceed $30,000.
That's the way I understood it. Mr. Sanchez, one of the committee members, told me that the most that we would be paid would be $30,000, but it would be paid based on his time and expense submitted. And if it was over $30,000, then he ate those extra charges.
That's exactly right.
Did he accept the indemnity provisions that you inserted?
So I understand he's accepted the contract as written.
Yes.
That you prepared.
Yes.
That you prepared. Okay.
Yes. And everybody has a copy of that.
Okay, we have a motion on the table and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed, Commissioner Zavaleta. Motion carries.
Item number 11, consider an action to rescind previous advance funding agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation, TxDOT, and enter into a revised agreement for the construction of internal roads at the Port of Brownsville. Hector?
Members of the board, good afternoon. Back in November 8th, I had brought a patent fund agreement from TxDOT for your all's approval. That agreement was submitted to the FAR district, which was passed on to the Austin's office. Upon review by the Austin office, they rejected the agreement on the grounds that leftovers money on the Q92, which were non-matchable, need to be now matched with 20%. And that is the only change to the agreement. Now, the way that the project will be impacted, it's relatively interesting how it comes about. We had estimated that the project would be $3.8 million. And basically, we were going to have to match $500,000 on the initial on the initial safety loop grant of $2 million, and then we were going to pay out of our pocket the balance, up to the $3.8 million. Now, if we do our spend $3.8 million, then there's basically no difference. It's just that the money that we were going to put forward, now it's going to count as a matching to the $1 million. And that is if we spend the $3.8 million. Of course, if the project cost is a little bit less, 3.5, then we do end up basically making that, paying that additional 20% on the matching. I did check with on our previous agreement that we have on Q92, and they are 80/20. So basically an oversight of the FAR district. That's bringing this issue back to the table.
That money is budgeted in our capital.
It is budgeted. So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item number 12, public comment. I don't believe we have any left for that. So item 13, adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting now adjourned, 8 o'clock in the evening.